And welcome back to Suncoast Live, your information station for all of Southwest Florida. Thanks for listening to WENG. Kerri and company with you. And as the nation continues to struggle during COVID-19 and millions of Americans out of jobs, will a second stimulus bill be the solution? Interesting stuff going on for sure. And well, I've got just the person to help us out. Chris Manske is a former United States Army captain. He's also the author of an upcoming book, The Prepared Investor, and owner of one of the largest financial advisor firms, managing $500 million for individuals and institutions all over the world. And Chris joins us this afternoon. Chris, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, the stimulus that we just got was great. But the stimulus bill, Chris, didn't save us, and jobless claims are still on the rise. And I want to get your take on that. Let's just get right into it. What do you feel? Do you think a second stimulus is on the way?
Well, I do think a second stimulus is on the way, but I'm really hopeful that we as constituents can help to guide our leadership to do this second round of assistance in a more effective way.
Okay.
When you look at what happened with the first round, one of the things that, at least in my professional circles, we just can't seem to stop talking about is the lack of transparency and some of the funds being used in ways that, just common sense says isn't appropriate.
Okay. What do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more. Curious.
Well, a perfect example would be, $350 billion of that original $2 trillion stimulus
All right.
supposed to be earmarked for small businesses, when in fact, almost 250 of that 350 ended up not helping small businesses, but going to large and mega-sized companies.
Right.
And transparency would have helped, I think, to not have that occur. But what's more is, now that it has happened, there are plenty of examples where companies, they're not in a position to be able to give the money back. And in some cases, they're in the position, but they don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. 58 billion went to the airlines, right?
Yeah, that's right. 17 billion to Boeing alone.
Jeez, wow. Huh.
And those numbers are hard for the average consumer to really wrap their mind around.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I think that a lot of Wall Street analysts are probably going to start talking again about too big to fail. That this is not new for us. We've been in the situation where we expect the government to help out companies, and regardless of where you are with politics, we don't have to say whether that's good or bad, but we can say that if we're going to do a second stimulus, let's do it well. Let's have accountability and transparency.
Wow, exactly. If you're just joining us, welcome to Suncoast Live. We're speaking with Chris Manske. Chris, you've been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, U.S. News, World Report, Financial Advisor magazine. I want to pick your brain about the market. Do you think that we will continue to fearmonger and kind of make knee-jerk reactions when it comes to the market? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it's absolutely natural that after a crisis, there is crisis aftermath. And depending on where you get your news from, the approach can be fear mongering. Depending on the motivation of the paper or the particular station, it can come across as fear mongering. And what's happening is very natural. We have something terrible happen. In this case, quarantine as a result of a virus, and there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be fear. Things can't stay the same.
Right.
So do we capitalize on that and get more eyeballs on news? Do we capitalize on that and maybe sell a few more products? Yeah, that does happen. It's not a pretty thing, but it is something that is going to continue.
Okay. Well, Chris, in your expert opinion, how can we come out ahead once this storm is over? What do you suggest?
Well, I think there's two things. The first is this storm is going to come around again, and so be prepared for it. When we talk about the storm, it's probably better to be more specific. In this case, it's a virus that we're not prepared for and the reaction to it.
Right.
We've had viruses in the past. There's been lots of, truly lots. You just in the last 20 years, there was 4 new viruses with SARS and MERS and H1N1 swine flu, and now the coronavirus. So now that quarantine is a socially acceptable reaction, we need to be prepared for when it happens again. Maybe it'll be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but preparation, I think, is the first thing to make sure that you come out ahead.
Okay.
And that's in the long term. The second thing would be in the short term, really assess your current situation. Look at it, with an unemotional eye, because crisis puts everybody in a very different picture. Right now, airlines are suffering, but Amazon is not. If you worked for an airline, you might be on furlough. If you work at Amazon, you might be doing overtime and making extra money. This is what happens in crisis, is that there are very different pockets of the results of the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And so assess where you are. And if you're on the side of, hey, things are not that bad, there are entire states that can say that.
Right.
Well, how can you do something to be helpful to others? Instead of engaging in the fear-mongering and the worry, really assess, are you in a bad spot? Because a lot of us aren't. Most crises, there are a fair number of folks that can really make a difference for others.
Yeah.
And, let's join them.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, Chris. I like it. And here in Florida, where we are one of the states that really is doing well, and we're opening back up quickly. So that's a good thing. What do you think? You said to be prepared ahead before a global crisis hits. You mentioned something about like a second wave. You kind of feel that's coming, because I do as well.
Yes, yeah, I think there's 2 ways to look at a second wave. So one would be immediately, and the other would be in the long term.
Okay.
Immediately, a second wave, it could be something related to our not understanding what these new powers that the Fed now has and the stimulus results. And when that starts to unfold, that then there's a second wave just immediately of investor concern and investor panic. So, yes, I do think that there is an immediate wave that's possible. But for many, the idea is don't fight the Fed. The stimulus is going to be a tide that raises all boats. And so for now, there's nothing to worry about. But at least the second way to look at it would be long term. And we can at least agree that, this isn't the last crisis we're going to have.
Right.
Our future is not, problem-free.
Yeah, that's true, Chris, for sure. And I think we're all in it together. People are very creative, and we'll get through this just like they did back in 1917. When it happened. So very interesting stuff. I like it, Chris. Where can we find your book? I would like to know that.
Oh, sure. Well, as I'd said, Amazon's doing well, and hopefully
Right.
that does well for my book too. You Google it you can look it up on Amazon. The Prepared Investor. If somebody were to Google my name, Christopher Manske, I pop right up.
Okay. What will we learn if we read your book, The Prepared Investor? It sounds like I'm going to learn a lot, my friend.
Oh, I love to hear you say that. Well, I think overall it's that the typical story that we all hear about investing during crisis, it is just the tip of the iceberg, and that we really can protect and grow our portfolios in the face of crisis.
Okay. Is it a good time to be investing, you think, right now?
Yes, yeah, I definitely do. The more that there is fear and uncertainty, the more likely there is that you can profit from taking risk.
Okay. I wish you were around before, because you should have told me to buy stock in Zoom, Chris. Come on.
Oh, yeah, Zoom has been quite the run up. Yes, yeah, and that's something that happens in crisis. This crisis, it was Zoom, but in 9/11, it was the security apparatus.
Right.
Every crisis we get this idea that things are changed, and we load up on what is profitable during that crisis. It's a very predictable response to to the the tidal wave of change.
Yeah, yeah, it's very well put. There's always businesses and people that rise from the ashes, so to speak, in crises. And then, like you mentioned, there's some states that really aren't affected that much at all. But then there are others like New York, and that's the epicenter and hotspots, so to speak. So,
Yes.
I tell you, Chris, well, we're getting through it. I'm going to get a copy of your book. It sounds great. It's The Prepared Investor, available on Amazon. Any last points of any things you can leave our listeners with? Any other tips or suggestions, Chris?
Well, I think also geographically, we talk about geographically that some are doing better than others. I also think industry-wise, if you know someone who's in the medical field, if you know someone who's one of the first responders, that is connected to, helping the community in this crisis, but why not do something that's useful to them? Why not do something nice? And a lot of times people think, well, I just don't know what to do. But take a moment and Google and see how do I make a difference for the people who
Yeah.
are making a difference, because there really are a lot of opportunities, whether it's providing money or providing things, providing
Yeah.
stuff.
Deliver some
There's a,
pizzas.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so easy. Once you just take a minute to kind of brainstorm about it.
Yeah, I love it. Chris Manske, thank you so much for being with us. And I would be remiss in my interview if I didn't thank you for your service in the United States Army. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Chris, you take care of yourself.
Okay, appreciate the time.
You bet. And we're going to roll on this Technology Tuesday. Of course, every Tuesday, that brings Niall Nichols' top technology tips. Always a good time. Niall's in next. But first, we're going to check a little bit of news. We're going to play another song or two.